intimate and secret, as if the roses themselves were trying to speak. Alara's pulse hammered in her ears, her scientific mind struggling to find a rational explanation, but none came. Instead, a wave of fascination washed over her, fear mingling with awe. Footsteps approached softly from behind, and Alara turned to see Rowan emerge from the shadows beneath an archway of blooming roses. His messy auburn hair was tousled by the breeze, and his piercing blue eyes held a grave intensity. He moved with a quiet urgency, his earth-toned clothes blending with the garden's greens and browns. "Alara," he said quietly, his voice low and steady, "you shouldn't be wandering here alone. Not now. The garden's awakening is more dangerous than you realize." She met his gaze, the earnest concern in his eyes stirring something deep within her. "I need to understand it, Rowan. This is no ordinary bloom." He stepped closer, lowering his voice further. "The curse isn't just a story anymore. It's alive and watching. Be careful where you tread." Despite the warning, Alara's curiosity was unyielding. That afternoon, as the sun climbed higher, she returned to the garden's western edge, near the gnarled old oak where the roses grew thickest. The petals here shimmered with an unnatural glow, their edges tinged with a subtle, shifting hue that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Suddenly, the air thickened around her, and a vision flickered at the edge of her sight. A shadowy figure moved among the thorns, a woman cloaked in mourning, her face veiled in sorrow. The air was heavy with the scent of wilted roses, and from somewhere distant came a mournful lullaby, haunting and fragile. Alara's breath caught in her throat. Was this a memory, a warning, or a trick of her imagination? She blinked, and the vision faded, leaving her trembling. Her hands shook as she gripped the rose bush beside her, the thorns pricking her skin, drawing a bead of blood that mingled with the soil. She pressed her palm against the earth, grounding herself, fighting the rising panic. "Alara!" Rowan's voice called out, breaking the spell. He appeared at the garden's entrance, his expression tight with worry. "What are you doing so far from the house?" "I told you it's dangerous." She looked up, their eyes locking. The fear in his gaze mirrored her own, but beneath it was something warmer, something she hadn't dared to hope for. Slowly, she rose, brushing dirt from her hands. "I had to see," she said softly, "to feel it for myself." He took a step toward her, hesitating, then reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. The contact was electric, sending a thrill through Alara despite the shadow of danger looming over them. For a moment, the garden seemed to hold its breath, the roses around them blooming with unnatural intensity, as if responding to their forbidden closeness. "We retethered to this place," Rowan murmured, "bound by secrets and sacrifices. But I don't want to lose you to it." Alara's heart surged. "Then let's face it together." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that twisted among the petals. The first bloom had awakened the garden's ancient power, and with it, a delicate, dangerous hope began to grow, one that neither of them could yet fully comprehend. As twilight settled, the whispers among the roses grew louder, threading through the air like a song of warning and longing. Alara and Rowan stood side by side, their hands entwined, ready to face the curse's dark embrace, even as the garden watched and waited. And somewhere deep within the shadows, the floral curse stirred, its sinister bloom just beginning. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the rose garden, the once vibrant blooms now tinged with a somber hue that seemed to drain the color from the air itself. Alara stood near the edge of the tangled rose, her green eyes tracing the delicate petals that fluttered in the soft breeze. She held her notebook close, fingers tightening around its worn spine as the weight of the garden's silence pressed in on her. From behind a thicket of thorny branches, a small figure emerged, Leela, Rowan's younger sister, her bright eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and fear. The girl's footsteps were light but hesitant, as if the very ground beneath her whispered warnings. She stopped beside Alara, reaching out tentatively to touch a rose whose edges curled like burnt parchment. "Do you think the garden is sick?" Leela's voice was barely above a whisper, trembling with an innocence that struck Elara to the core. Elara glanced down at the girl, noting the way her small fingers lingered over the fragile flower. "It's changing," she admitted, her voice soft but steady. "But I'm not sure why yet." Lila's gaze drifted upward to the sky, where the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow that seemed to falter before fading into dusk. "Mom said the garden has been sad lately," she said quietly, like it's waiting for something. The mention of Rowan's mother sent a ripple through Elara's thoughts. She recalled the stories Rowan had shared, the weight of loss that clung to his family like a shadow, the burden of secrets too heavy for his young shoulders. She reached out, placing a reassuring hand on Lila's arm. "We'll figure it out," Elara promised, though a knot of unease tightened in her chest. Rowan appeared then, his tall frame moving with measured steps through the thinning light. His piercing blue eyes flicked between Lila and Elara, darkening as he took in the girl's pale face and the fragile state of the roses around them. "Lila," he said gently, wrapping an arm around her protectively, "it's going to be okay." But the lie hung between them, fragile as a petal caught in a storm. As twilight deepened, Elara found herself drawn toward the heart of the garden, where the ancient rose arbor stood like a sentinel guarding centuries of secrets. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fading blossoms, mingled with something else, an undercurrent of sorrow that prickled her skin. Her scientific mind wrestled with the inexplicable phenomena she witnessed, shadows that flickered against the fading light, whispers that seemed to drift on the breeze, calling to her in voices half-remembered. Each step forward felt heavier, as if the garden itself resisted her presence. Rowan joined her beneath the arching branches, his voice low. "It's getting worse," he admitted. "The darkness creeps further every day." Elara nodded, swallowing hard. "I want to understand it, to find a way to stop it." He looked at her then, his gaze sharp but tinged with vulnerability. "I don't want to lose you, Elara, not like before." The weight of his words settled over them, a silent acknowledgement of the curse that bound their fates. Lila's earlier words echoed in Elara's mind, the garden waiting for something, a loss that seemed inevitable. Yet beneath the fear, a fragile hope lingered, embodied in the girl's innocent trust and Rowan's fierce resolve. As night cloaked Ravenwood, the garden seemed to hold its breath, the roses' faint glow flickering like embers in the dark. Elara and Rowan stood side by side, the fragile light between them a testament to love's endurance amid encroaching shadows. But the garden was far from silent, and the darkness was not yet done with them. Under the heavy canopy of ancient rosebushes, Elara's fingers sifted through the rich soil, disturbed earth crumbling softly beneath her touch. The scent of damp earth mixed with the intoxicating fragrance of blooming roses, thick and sweet, yet somehow laced with a subtle bitterness that unsettled her. She had been drawn here by a whisper of something hidden, a secret the garden had guarded for generations. Her heart pounded as her fingers brushed against a strange texture beneath the roots, a worn leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and faded to a muted crimson, tied delicately with an equally aged ribbon. She pulled it free, brushing away dust and soil, her breath catching in her throat. The garden's past was no longer just a story told in hushed tones. It was tangible, brittle with age, yet pulsing with a dark vitality. Rowan appeared at the edge of the clearing, his auburn hair tousled, eyes sharp and shadowed with concern. "What have you found?" His voice was low but steady, laced with an urgency that made Elara look up sharply. "A journal," she said, opening the fragile cover carefully. "It looks like it belonged to one of your ancestors. There are entries here, dates, names, things about the curse." Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the pages, the faded ink revealing a story of love, betrayal, and a sacrifice made in desperation. The words painted a vivid picture of a family torn apart, and a curse born from a wound too deep to heal. Rowan stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "I've always known the curse was tied to my family, but I never dared to learn the full story. It's painful." They sat together beneath the roses, the petals casting dappled shadows over the journal's fragile pages. Rowan's voice softened as he shared memories he had long kept buried: the disappearance of his mother, the anguish that had shaped his childhood, the burden of guarding the garden's secret. Alara listened, her scientific mind wrestling with the emotional truth laid bare. The garden was not merely a subject for study. It was a living, breathing entity entwined with the fate of those who loved within its bounds. Later, they visited Old Thumb, the garden's aged caretaker. His hands shook as he leafed through brittle documents, recounting the bitter betrayal that had fractured Rowan's lineage centuries ago. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment and dried rose petals, the weight of history pressing down on them. Alara's skepticism faltered as the lines between myth and reality blurred. The curse was no mere legend, it was a relentless force, fueled by pain and bound by ancient magic. Under the silver glow of the full moon, Alara and Rowan returned to the garden's heart. The roses shimmered unnaturally, their petals whispering secrets on the night breeze. Tension hung between them, but so did a fragile hope. They were no longer just two individuals caught in a tragic tale. They were allies, bound by a shared purpose and a growing affection that dared to defy the darkness. "We have to face this together," Rowan said quietly, his hand brushing against hers. Alara nodded, the journal clutched tightly in her other hand. For the garden, for those lost, and for us. As the night deepened, the garden seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the next chapter in its tangled roots. The moonlight cast a pale glow across the garden, illuminating the intricate lattice of thorns that curled like serpents around the ancient rose bushes. Alara's mind raced as she pieced together the fragments of history that had once been scattered and obscured by time and fear. The betrayal that had birthed the curse was no mere family quarrel, but a devastating fracture that had torn through generations, binding lovers to a fate of disappearance and despair. Her scientific instincts wrestled with the overwhelming evidence of magic woven into the garden's fabric. Rowan's presence was a steady anchor amid the swirling chaos of her thoughts. He shared more than memories. He shared his fears, his guilt, and his hope that the curse could be broken. The vulnerability in his voice was a revelation, drawing Alara closer in a way that transcended words. Their connection deepened, rooted in shared pain and a burgeoning trust that neither had expected to find. When Old Thumb revealed the ancient records, Alara was struck by the palpable weight of the past pressing into the present. The caretaker's weathered hands trembled as he recited the tale: a love betrayed, a witch's curse born of heartbreak, and a sacrifice demanded in the name of protection. The garden was both prison and sanctuary, and the roses themselves were the curse's silent witnesses, blooming with a beauty that belied their sinister purpose. The night air grew thick with anticipation as Alara and Rowan stood together beneath the blooming roses, their shadows entwined among the thorns. The garden whispered around them, secrets carried on the wind, and a promise of trials yet to come. They were caught in the tangled roots of history and magic, their fates entwined with the garden's dark legacy. Alara's heart pounded with a mixture of dread and determination. Could she embrace the impossible, trust in the unseen, and fight for a love that defied the very curse threatening to consume them? The answers lay buried in the earth beneath the roses, tangled in roots both literal and metaphorical. As dawn approached, painting the sky with hues of pale gold and rose, Alara closed the journal gently. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril and sacrifice, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Together, they would unravel the curse's secrets and face whatever darkness awaited. Yet, as the garden stirred awake, a chilling awareness settled in her bones. The curse was awakening too, more potent and unforgiving than ever before. The tangled roots of the past were reaching out, and the garden's deadly bloom was only beginning. The morning mist clung stubbornly to the dense foliage of Ravenwood's rose garden, the eerie silence broken only by the faint rustle of leaves and the occasional drip of dew from thorny branches. Alara's boots pressed lightly against the soft earth as she ventured deeper than she had before. Guided by a map of old garden plans she had found tucked away in Old Thumb's ledger. Her heart thrummed with a mixture of scientific curiosity and growing apprehension. Rowan followed close behind, his brows knit together, eyes scanning the shadows as if expecting something to leap from the darkness. They reached a narrow path overgrown with wild ivy and brambles, the roses here darker, their petals tinged with a strange, almost unnatural hue. Alara crouched to examine one particular bloom, its edges curling as if scorched by an invisible flame. "These aren't ordinary roses," she murmured, fingers gingerly tracing the delicate petals. "There's some kind of energy here, something malevolent." Rowan nodded grimly. "This is the heart of the curse. My family tried to keep it contained, but it's grown restless." Pushing aside a tangle of thorns, Alara's hand brushed against cold stone. Vines parted to reveal an ancient archway, its surface worn smooth, but still marked with faded runes that pulsed faintly under her touch. A shiver ran down her spine. "This must be the gateway," Rowan whispered, eyes darkening, "the place where the sacrifice was made centuries ago." Alara's scientific mind wrestled with the supernatural implications, but the undeniable power thrumming in the air left no room for doubt. As they stepped beneath the arch, the garden seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, a sharp cry shattered the silence. Alara spun toward the sound, heart pounding. Mara's basket lay abandoned near the edge of the hidden grove, but Mara herself was gone. Panic surged through Alara's veins. "Mara!" Rowan called, his voice tight with fear. They searched frantically, but only the whispering wind answered, carrying faint echoes of sorrow and warning. Alara's breath hitched as she clutched Rowan's arm. "The curse, it's waking," Rowan's jaw clenched. "We can't let it take anyone else." Their gazes locked, a silent vow passing between them. Despite the terror that gnawed at their hearts, they would face the darkness together. The garden's veil of thorns no longer hid just beauty, it concealed a deadly secret that demanded sacrifice. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the twisted roses, Alara and Rowan steeled themselves for the battle ahead. The garden's fate and their own hung precariously in the balance. But beneath the fear, a fragile flame of hope flickered, born from a love that dared to challenge the curse itself. The path forward was uncertain, the dangers real and unforgiving. Yet Alara's resolve hardened. She would not flee. She would uncover the truth, protect those she loved, and confront whatever darkness awaited beyond the veil of thorns. Alara sat cross-legged on the woven rug in Mara's cottage, the air thick with the scent of dried lavender and rosemary. The soft crackle of the fire filled the silence as Mara carefully unfolded an ancient, brittle parchment across the wooden table. "This," she began, her voice low and reverent, "is the key to breaking the curse that has plagued Ravenwood for generations." Alara's sharp green eyes scanned the faded symbols and delicate script, her botanist's mind racing to piece together the meaning. "It's a ritual?" she asked cautiously, her voice tinged with skepticism. Mara nodded slowly, her silver hair catching the flickering candlelight. "Yes. It requires a sacrifice, yes, but more than that, it demands love and courage, the very things the curse seeks to snatch away." Alara's heart clenched at the weight of those words. For years, she had clung to science, to facts and proofs. Magic was a language she barely spoke, a theory she hesitated to accept. Yet, the inexplicable had been unfolding all around her, the roses that whispered secrets, the shadows that seemed to breathe, the disappearances that defied logic. "How can we be sure this will work?" she murmured, brushing a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear. Mara's eyes held a fierce conviction. "Because it was written by those who came before us, who knew the pain and the hope entwined in this garden. The choice is yours to believe or to falter." Meanwhile, outside beneath the silver glow of the moon, Rowan wandered the garden's labyrinthine paths. His fingers trailed along the thorny stems of the roses, each prick a sting reminding him of the family he could never fully escape. The curse was not just a legend. It was a living, breathing weight on his shoulders. He paused in the heart of the garden, where the oldest roses bloomed with an unnatural vibrancy, their petals a deep, bruised red that seemed almost to pulse with life. "I will not let this destroy us," he whispered to the night, the resolve hardening in his piercing blue eyes. Back in the cottage, Elara wrestled with the conflicting truths she faced. Her meticulous notes lay scattered across the table, botanical observations mingling with the arcane instructions Mara had shared. She flipped through pages of folklore and scientific texts alike, trying to find a bridge between the two worlds. "There has to be a rational explanation," she muttered, tracing a rose illustration with a trembling finger. But the more she searched, the more she felt the walls of her certainty crumble. Later, beneath the canopy of night, Elara and Rowan met in the garden's secluded heart. The air was heavy with the scent of blooming roses, their fragrance both intoxicating and ominous. They stood close, the unspoken fears and hopes swirling between them as vividly as the petals around their feet. "I don't know if I'm ready to believe in magic," Elara confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Rowan's gaze softened, his hand reaching out to brush a stray lock of hair from her face. "Believing isn't about readiness. It's about choosing to trust, even when everything screams otherwise." Their eyes met, a fragile bridge forming between their worlds. In that moment, the garden seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if love could truly defy the darkness. As the first faint light of dawn began to chase away the shadows, Elara felt the stirrings of a new resolve. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger, but with Rowan beside her and the ancient ritual as their guide, she dared to hope that the curse could be broken. But the garden was watching, its secrets far from fully revealed, and the price of hope was yet to be paid. The garden was alive in a way that made Elara's skin prick with both wonder and dread. Twilight had draped Ravenwood in a veil of soft purples and blues, the shadows lengthening like fingers reaching for the secrets buried beneath the soil. She found herself beneath the archways of the rose garden once again, the scent of the flowers thick and heady, almost overwhelming in the cool evening air. Rowan was already there, standing with his back to her, hands tucked into the pockets of his earth-stained trousers. His auburn hair caught the last golden rays of the sun, setting it aflame like a halo. When he turned, his piercing blue eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You came," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying the weight of unspoken worries and hope. Elara stepped forward, the dirt streaked him of her blouse brushing against the foliage. "I wouldn't miss it." They moved beneath the rose arches, where blooms cascaded like waterfalls of crimson and gold. The silence between them was thick, a fragile thread stretched taut with emotion. Elara's heart hammered, each beat echoing the tumult of thoughts she had tried to silence since arriving at Ravenwood. "I've been holding back," Rowan confessed, his gaze dropping to their nearly touching hands. "Because I'm afraid of what happens if we don't." Elara swallowed hard, the scientist in her battling the woman in love, afraid of disappearing. She whispered. He nodded, a shadow crossing his features. "But also afraid of never feeling this, whatever this is, because of the curse." Her fingers brushed against his, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. The moment they touched, a ripple passed through the garden. The roses around them shivered, petals unfurling faster than nature should allow, glowing faintly in the dimming light. The unnatural bloom seemed to pulse with life, as if fed by the power of their connection. Elara looked up into Rowan's eyes, reading the same mixture of longing and fear mirrored there. "Is this the curse responding?" she murmured. He exhaled slowly, closing the gap between them. "Or maybe it's the garden acknowledging us." Their hands clasped fully now, warmth radiating between them. Elara's fingers traced the line of his jaw, marveling at how real he was, how present in this moment despite the shadow looming over them. The garden's scent enveloped them, a rush of floral sweetness tinged with something wild and ancient. "I don't want to run away," she admitted, voice trembling but fierce. "Not from you, not from this." Rowan's lips brushed hers, tentative, testing boundaries that had been drawn long before their time. The kiss deepened, a mingling of desperation and hope, soft and fierce all at once. Around them, the roses bloomed with unnatural intensity, petals shimmering like embers in the gathering darkness. Suddenly, a soft rustle stirred the garden's edge. Mara emerged quietly, her silver hair catching the moonlight as she approached with a gentle smile. "The garden listens," she said softly, her eyes twinkling with ancient knowledge. "And it feels your courage." Alara pulled back slightly, breathless. "But what does it mean for us?" Mara's gaze was steady. "It means the curse knows you here, and it will test you. But love, true love, is a powerful force, perhaps the most potent magic of all." Rowan squeezed Ilara's hand. "Then we face it together." The garden seemed to hold its breath, the roses glowing ever brighter, as if offering their blessing and warning in equal measure. Alara felt the weight of the moment settle around her. This was no longer just a scientific inquiry or a whispered legend. It was a living, breathing battle of heart and fate. As the stars emerged overhead, the garden pulsed with life and danger intertwined. Alara and Rowan stood united, their forbidden touch a beacon in the darkness, daring the curse to challenge their love. But deep beneath the soil, where roots tangled with secrets and shadows, the floral curse stirred, awakened by the promise of a love that refused to be silenced. And so the dance of roses and ash continued, their story unfolding with every forbidden touch. Alara's footsteps echoed softly on the worn wooden floor as she stepped into Mara's herbalist cottage, the scent of dried herbs and earth greeting her like an old friend. The warm glow of candles flickered against the walls lined with jars of fragrant blossoms and roots, casting dancing shadows that seemed to whisper secrets from centuries past. Mara sat quietly by the hearth, her silver hair catching the firelight as she looked up with eyes full of ancient knowledge and quiet sorrow. "Alara," Mara began, her voice a gentle murmur yet weighted with gravity, "there is more you must understand about the curse that clings to these roses. It is not merely a tale to frighten children or a superstition to dismiss. The garden demands a price, one that is paid in blood and sacrifice." Alara felt her breath hitch, the words settling deep in her chest like a stone. She had hoped the curse was a dark metaphor, a tragic myth twisted by time. But Mara's steady gaze bore into her, unwavering and resolute. "Sacrifice," Alara whispered, her fingers tightening around the edge of the wooden table. "What kind of sacrifice?" Mara's eyes darkened with the weight of memory. Long ago, a lover's betrayal birthed this curse, and since then, each summer demands a life in exchange for the garden's bloom. Those who love here too deeply risk vanishing, becoming part of the garden's sorrowful legacy. The room felt suddenly colder, the shadows growing longer as Mara's words settled like a shroud over Alara's thoughts. She swallowed, fighting the rising panic that threatened to unravel her resolve. Later that evening, under a sky brushed with the fading hues of twilight, Alara found herself near the garden's wrought iron gates. The scent of roses was heavy, intoxicating, yet laced with something more sinister beneath their delicate petals. A figure approached through the dimming light, his footsteps sure and determined. "Nathan." "Alara," Nathan called softly but with urgency, his brow furrowed in concern. "You have to leave this place. You don't know what you're risking. The stories aren't just stories. People disappear here. I don't want to lose you too." His earnest eyes searched hers, pleading for understanding. But Alara's heart throbbed with conflict. She knew the danger. She felt it pulsing in the very air she breathed. Yet the pull to uncover the truth, to protect Rowan and the garden, was stronger than fear. "I can't just walk away," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil. "Not when I'm so close. Not when the answers might save more than just me." Nathan's shoulders slumped, but his hand reached out, briefly touching hers, a silent promise of care and warning. Alone again, Alara wandered through the rose garden, the twilight wrapping around her like a velvet cloak. The air was thick with the scent of blossoms,